Hi guys, welcome back to another deep dive into the boring, calm history of our world. Today, we're stepping into the heart of medieval Scotland, a land of mist-covered mountains, ironclad knights, political betrayal, and unstoppable courage. And at the center of this storm stands one man, a king who refused to kneel, a king who fought against one of the most powerful empires of his age, a king who transformed a broken nation into a legend. This is the story of Robert the Bruce, the warrior king who shaped Scotland's destiny. So sit tight, turn up the volume, and get ready for a cinematic historical journey you'll feel in your bones. The boy who would be king. Robert the Bruce was born in 1274, came into a world already trembling under pressure. Scotland was a land divided, powerful clans competing for influence, rival claims to the throne, and an ever-tightening grip from the English crown. From the moment Robert entered the world as the son of a noble family claiming descent from ancient Scottish kings, destiny was already whispering his name. But destiny is never simple, and for Robert, it was never gentle. A land torn apart. By the late 1200s, King Alexander III of Scotland had died suddenly, leaving the kingdom without a clear heir. This vacuum of authority was like blood in the water, and sharks quickly circled. Multiple nobles stepped forward claiming the throne, but none held universal support. Scotland was on the brink of civil war. Enter England's King Edward I, a man known to history as Edward Longshanks, a towering figure both in height and ambition. A king who did not simply rule, he dominated. Edward offered to help Scotland choose a rightful king, but help was not what he had in mind. He wanted control. He wanted Scotland. He wanted every hill, river, and blade of grass under the English crown. Young Robert's dilemma. Robert was only a boy when he saw the political chaos unfold. His father, a powerful noble, believed the Bruce family had a legitimate claim to the Scottish throne. That belief created enemies, countless, dangerous enemies, and Robert grew up knowing that his family's ambition was both a shield and a sword. He learned early: trust no one. Listen more than you speak. Strike only when the moment is right. These lessons would later define his reign and save his life. Edward's tyranny begins. Edward I installed John Balliol as a puppet king, a ruler with a crown but no power. Scotland's independence evaporated overnight. English soldiers patrolled Scottish towns. Taxes flowed south. Nobles were forced to swear loyalty to the English king. To a proud people, this was not just oppression, it was humiliation. Rebellion sparked everywhere. Clans united in anger. And in the middle of this storm rose a name that would echo through eternity: William Wallace. Robert was young but already ambitious. At first, he did not openly join Wallace's rebellion. His position was tricky. The Bruce family wanted the throne, and open rebellion might ruin their claim. But deep inside, Robert admired Wallace's courage, his fire, his defiance. And soon, Robert would ignite his own fire. A conflict within. Robert's life was a constant game of balancing alliances. On one side, his duty to Scotland. On the other, his family's overwhelming pressure to claim the throne. And above all, the brutal reality that Edward I would crush anyone who opposed him. Robert grew into a strong young man, tall, athletic, trained in the arts of war, diplomacy, and leadership. Knights who watched him said he had the presence of a king even before he wore a crown. But a king without a kingdom is just a dreamer. And Robert was done dreaming. Robert's turning point. By 1297, Wallace had scored a legendary victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge,
shocking England and inspiring the Scottish people. That moment transformed something inside Robert Bruce. He realized that neutrality was impossible. Scotland needed fighters, not silent nobles. Robert joined the resistance. But Edward I struck back with overwhelming force. Wallace was eventually betrayed and captured. His execution was brutal, a message carved in blood that no Scottish rebellion would be tolerated. Yet all Edward truly achieved was the opposite. He created more rebels, more anger, more determination, and he pushed Robert Bruce onto a path of no return. Robert the Rebel. By the early 1300s, Robert was no longer just a noble. He was a symbol of hope. People whispered his name in taverns and marketplaces. The Bruce will rise. The Bruce will lead us. The Bruce will free us. But for Robert, this path came at a cost. To claim the throne, he would have to break alliances, make impossible choices, and even spill Scottish blood. Medieval politics were not battles of sword alone. They were battles of survival. The deadly decision. In 1306, everything reached a breaking point. Robert met with John Comyn, a powerful rival claimant to the throne. Their meeting was supposed to be peaceful, a negotiation, perhaps even an alliance. But history changed that day. Words turned to anger, anger turned to fear, and fear turned to violence. In the heat of the moment, Robert attacked Comyn. Some say it was self-defense, others believe it was a calculated move. But whatever the truth, Comyn died inside a church, an unforgivable act in the eyes of the church and a direct challenge to Edward I. With that single strike, Robert destroyed all possibilities of compromise. He had only two choices left: win the crown or lose his head. The coronation. Just weeks later, Robert the Bruce was crowned King of Scots at Scone. The crown was placed upon his head not by politics, but by urgency, by destiny, by fire. Yet Scotland was not ready. Many nobles opposed him. Edward I was enraged. The English army marched north with vengeance in their hearts. Robert's reign began not with celebration, but with disaster. The fall of the king. Within months, Bruce suffered defeat after defeat. He became a king without an army, a king without a castle, a king without a kingdom. He was forced into hiding, living in caves, forests, remote islands. His brothers were executed, his supporters hunted down, his wife and daughter captured. To the world, the Bruce Rebellion was over. To England, Bruce was a fugitive. To Scotland, a tragic hero. But to Robert, this was the beginning. Because in his darkest hour, he discovered something unbreakable inside himself: the will to rise again. The legend of the spider. One of the most famous stories about Robert comes from this period of exile. It is said that Bruce, hiding in a cold, damp cave, watched a small spider try to climb its web. Again and again, the spider fell. 6 times it tried, 6 times it failed, but on the 7th attempt, it succeeded. Robert took this as a sign. If a tiny creature could persist, so could he. So must he. He rose from the cave with a new fire in his heart, and the warrior king was reborn. Robert the Bruce had lost everything. His army shattered, his family imprisoned, his land seized, and his crown nearly meaningless. But exile had forged him into something far stronger than before. He was no longer just a noble claiming a throne. He was a man who had tasted the deepest lows of defeat and returned with iron in his soul. When Robert finally stepped out from his shadowy hiding places, The caves, the islands, the windswept hills. He was ready for war. Not a rebellion of emotion, but a calculated, patient, relentless campaign to win Scotland back, piece by piece. And he began with the one thing every legendary leader needs: loyal followers willing to fight against impossible odds. Gathering the fallen. At first, only a handful of loyal men dared join him. A few knights, loyal clansmen, and the remains of the Bruce family's old supporters. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and surrounded by enemies from all sides. But these men followed Robert not because he was king, but because he refused to break when everyone else did. They saw in him something rare, a leader who could rise after total destruction and still speak of victory. Robert's first move was bold and dangerous. He targeted the smaller English-held castles one by one, avoiding big battles, striking fast, and disappearing into the landscape before the enemy could react. It was guerrilla warfare in an age of knights and castles, and it worked. While Edward's forces searched for large Scottish armies, Bruce attacked from the shadows. He fought like a wolf, not a knight. Swift, silent, lethal. The turning tide. By 1307, a miracle happened, or rather, history aligned itself with Bruce's destiny. King Edward I of England, the feared Hammer of the Scots, the man who destroyed Wallace and hunted Bruce relentlessly, died on his way to crush Robert once and for all. Scotland breathed for the first time in years. Edward's son, Edward II, became king. But unlike his father, the new king lacked discipline, strategy, and respect from his own nobles. The English political world was now divided, distracted, and weaker. And Robert Bruce saw his moment. He unleashed a series of lightning campaigns across Scotland, reclaiming castles, uniting clans, punishing traitorous nobles, rewarding loyalty, attacking English garrisons with precision. Castle by castle, town by town, hill by hill, Scotland was waking up. The spirit of the nation, long crushed under English boots, began to rise again. Scottish farmers hid Bruce's men in their barns. Clans sent covert supplies. Villagers whispered, "The Bruce lives, and he fights for us." Robert was becoming not just a king, but a myth, a symbol, a force. The fall of English strongholds. Robert developed a ruthless but effective strategy. Instead of occupying captured English castles, which required large defending forces, he destroyed them, tearing down walls and burning supplies so the English could never use them again. It was shockingly unconventional, almost unthinkable for medieval warfare. But it worked brilliantly. Every destroyed castle weakened English power. Every burned fortress sent a message: Scotland will never kneel again. Soon, only a few major strongholds remained under English control, and Robert was now strong enough to challenge them. The loyalty of the clans. Winning Scotland was not just about defeating England. It was about uniting the Scottish clans, many of whom had rivalries deeper than oceans. Some clans had supported the Commons, Bruce's old rivals. Others remained neutral, waiting to join whichever side looked stronger. Some even aided the English, seeking power through betrayal. Robert needed all of them. So he became both warrior and diplomat. He met with clan leaders in hidden valleys, on lonely moors, inside smoky wooden halls lit by torches. He promised land, protection, respect, and a future. He offered forgiveness to former enemies, as long as they swore loyalty. He became a king, not by force, but by negotiation, charisma, and leadership. Slowly, Scotland united under his banner. The Battle of Loudon Hill, 1307. One of Robert Bruce's most brilliant victories came at Loudon Hill. Facing a powerful English force led by Aymer de Valence, the same man who had once defeated Bruce, Robert chose the battlefield with tactical genius. He narrowed the terrain by digging deep trenches on both sides, creating a deadly corridor where the English cavalry could not maneuver. When the English knights charged, they were trapped, forced into a narrow killing zone. Scottish spearmen hammered them with precision. In minutes, the unstoppable English cavalry, the pride of their military, fell apart. It was Bruce's first major open-field victory. The message was clear. The King of Scotland had returned, and he knew how to win. The rising hope. After Loudon Hill, Scottish morale exploded. Bruce became a beacon of hope. Recruits poured in. Clans that once doubted him now pledged allegiance. Robert's victories grew bolder. He retook major towns like Inverness, Aberdeen, Perth, and Galloway. Each success tightened the noose around remaining English positions. Soon, only a handful of English-held castles remained, including the mighty fortress of Stirling. And Stirling Castle would decide the fate of a nation. The road to Bannockburn. In 1313, Robert's brother Edward Bruce captured almost all remaining English strongholds except one, Stirling Castle, the most important fortress in Scotland. The English commander of Stirling made a deal. If no English army came to rescue him by midsummer of 1314, he would surrender the castle to the Scots. A dangerous agreement, because it guaranteed one thing: England would come. And they came. Edward II marched north with one of the largest armies ever assembled in medieval Britain. Armored knights, longbowmen, infantry, mercenaries, tens of thousands strong, a tidal wave of steel. This was not just a battle. This was a reckoning. The future of Scotland would be decided in blood. Robert Bruce gathered his smaller Scottish force, farmers, clansmen, knights, archers, united not by wealth or armor, but by belief. The year was 1314, and the world was about to witness one of the most legendary battles in Scottish history, the Battle of Bannockburn, the calm before the storm. As the massive English army camped near the Bannockburn, a muddy stream and thick forested region, Robert's men prepared for a fight they might never return from. But Robert spoke to them not as a distant king, but as a brother in arms. He reminded them of the years of oppression, the burning of their homes, the execution of Wallace, the suffering of their families, the hope of a free Scotland. He did not promise life, he promised glory. And his men listened. The night before the battle. The night before Bannockburn was thick with tension. The English camp, massive, loud, overflowing with soldiers, stretched across the fields like a steel ocean. Fires burned bright. Horses neighed restlessly. Officers barked orders deep into the night. They were confident, too confident. England believed victory was guaranteed. After all, they outnumbered the Scots by several times. They had elite cavalry, trained longbowmen, and more supplies than Scotland had seen in years. But a king's heart cannot be measured in numbers, and Robert the Bruce had something far more powerful than a large army: a reason to fight. Across the field, the Scottish camp was smaller, quieter, more humble. There were no lavish tents, no mountains of supplies, no gold-trimmed banners. Just men hardened by years of struggle. Men who had walked through defeat and risen again. Men who believed this battle would shape the destiny of their children and their children's children. Robert walked among them silently, offering calm words, gripping their shoulders, giving them courage simply through his presence. His men didn't just respect him, they loved him. They trusted him. They would die for him. And by dawn, they would be ready to kill for their freedom. The famous duel. As the sun rose on June 23, 1314, an English knight rode out ahead of his army. Not just any knight, Sir Henry de Bohun, a fearsome warrior in full armor, mounted on a massive war horse. He spotted Robert the Bruce riding ahead of his troops, lightly armored, carrying only a battle axe. De Bohun saw his chance. If he could kill Robert before the battle even began, Scotland would crumble. The English knight lowered his lance and charged, a thunderous, earth-shaking sprint straight toward the Scottish king. Soldiers from both sides froze, watching in shock. Robert didn't flee. He didn't panic. He didn't even raise his shield. At the very last second, Bruce dodged sideways with flawless timing. In a single deadly motion, he rose in his saddle and brought down his axe with a crack that echoed across the field. He split de Bohun's helmet in two. The English knight fell lifeless. The Scottish army erupted in cheers. Hope surged like lightning. Their king wasn't just a leader, he was a warrior of legendary skill. Robert looked down at his shattered axe and said calmly, "I am sorrowed, for I have broken my favorite weapon." That moment traveled through the Scottish ranks like fire. Morale soared. The English felt fear for the first time. The real battle had not yet begun, but the advantage belonged to Robert. The terrain of destiny. Robert Bruce had chosen Bannockburn with genius. The terrain was his weapon. The battleground was filled with marshy ground, narrow passes, hidden pits, thick woods, and the Bannockburn stream. Heavy English cavalry would struggle here. Their horses would sink in mud. Their formations would break apart. Their overwhelming numerical advantage would shrink into chaos. Robert turned nature itself into a trap. He positioned his forces in tight schiltron formations, dense circles of spearmen trained to repel cavalry. The Scots didn't need fancy armor. Their discipline and unity were enough. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. It was strategy at its finest. The first day of battle. The English knights charged first, loud, powerful, overconfident, but they found themselves crushed by marshes and choked by narrow paths. The Scottish spearmen braced their long pikes, and the English cavalry broke against them like waves on a rock. The Scottish line held firm. English knights fell into hidden pits filled with wooden stakes. Horses toppled. Soldiers drowned in mud. Confusion spread. Edward II watched in disbelief. The Scots were not supposed to win, not even for a moment. But Robert had transformed his small army into a wall of iron. When evening came, the English withdrew, frustrated, shocked, and demoralized. The Scots rejoiced, but Robert ordered discipline. Tomorrow would decide everything.
The dawn of day 2. June 24th dawned with a red sky, a warrior sky. The English forces, desperate and cramped, pushed forward in massive waves. Robert waited. He let the English compress themselves against the natural barriers.
Then he ordered his spearmen to advance. This was unheard of. Spearmen didn't advance, they defended. But Robert's men marched forward steadily, their long pikes forming a deadly forest of steel. The English were pushed back, crushed together, unable to maneuver. Archers attempted to flank the Scots, but Robert's knights swung around and drove them off. Hour by hour, the English lines buckled. The moment the world changed. Finally, with a roar that shook the ground, Robert Bruce ordered a full charge. The Scots surged forward with unstoppable force. The English army collapsed. Knights threw down their weapons. Horses screamed and overturned. Soldiers were pushed into the Bannockburn, drowning under their own weight. Edward II fled the battlefield in panic, abandoning his army, abandoning Stirling Castle, and abandoning any illusion of English dominance. The undefeatable English army had been broken, shattered, destroyed. Bannockburn was not just a victory. It was a miracle, a turning point, a moment that carved Robert Bruce's name into the stone of history. The aftermath. The Scottish camp erupted with joy. The impossible had happened. Farmers, commoners, clansmen, and knights embraced each other with tears. Songs were sung, flags were raised, fires lit the night sky. But Robert the Bruce remained calm, humble, and focused. He knew this was not just a victory in war, it was the birth of a nation's future. Bannockburn didn't just defeat an army, it ignited the spirit of Scotland. It transformed Robert from a rebel king to a legend. Yet the war was not over. England still held parts of Scotland. Nobles still plotted. Threats still lingered. Robert now had to secure Scotland's freedom, not just on the battlefield, but in the eyes of the world. And that journey would lead to treaties, diplomacy, final conquests, and the historic document that would shake Europe. A king after the storm. After the thunder of Bannockburn faded, Scotland stood in a new light. For years, the people had only known fear, hunger, and the crushing weight of English rule. But now, for the first time in a generation, hope walked freely across the land. Robert the Bruce was no longer a king running, hiding, and fighting in the shadows. He was the king who defeated the unbeatable, the king who shattered England's pride, the king who united clans who once spilled each other's blood. Yet Robert knew victory on a battlefield was only the beginning. Winning freedom was another war entirely, because England, wounded and embarrassed, would not accept defeat easily, and the world still did not recognize Scotland's independence. The journey to make Scotland truly free was just beginning. Cleaning the land of enemies. Even after Bannockburn, several English-held castles remained inside Scotland. So Robert launched strategic campaigns to reclaim every stronghold. He didn't rush. He didn't waste men's lives. He struck with methodical precision. One by one, he either captured or destroyed English positions. Berwick, Roxburgh, Edinburgh Castle, Jedburgh, Linlithgow, Dundee. Some castles were taken through brutal sieges, others through daring nighttime assaults, and a few through pure intelligence, using bribery, infiltration, or deception. Every victory tightened Robert's grip on Scotland. He also made sure no English garrison could ever use those castles again. If he couldn't hold a fortress, he destroyed it. Robert wasn't just fighting a war. He was eliminating the possibility of future wars. dealing with traitors and political threats. But Robert's greatest threat wasn't always England. Sometimes it was the Scottish nobles who still refused to unite. Some clans had supported the Cummin family, and they still resented Robert for killing John Cummin years earlier. Some nobles wanted their own power. Some sought English bribes. Robert used wisdom and sometimes hard consequences to bring order. He pardoned many who pledged loyalty, but he also punished those who continued to conspire. This wasn't cruelty, it was survival. A king who cannot control his own nobles cannot protect his nation. Slowly, Robert built a Scotland united by a single purpose: freedom. The invasion of England. Yes, you heard that right. After years of defending, Scotland went on the offensive. Robert Bruce began invading northern England in lightning raids. These attacks had several goals: weaken England's economy, pressure political leaders, force peace negotiations, reward loyal Scottish clans with supplies, and show Europe that Scotland was strong enough to stand on its own. Scottish raiders became legends, striking quickly, burning enemy supply lines, and retreating into the Highlands before anyone could respond. England's northern counties lived in constant fear. These raids also showed Europe, especially the Pope and other kings, that England no longer controlled Scotland. Robert wasn't just protecting Scotland, he was proving it could not be conquered again.
A new alliance, Scotland and France. To strengthen his kingdom even further, Robert renewed the ancient alliance between Scotland and France, known as the Old Alliance. This was a brilliant move, because England was also fighting France. So while England attacked Scotland from the north, the French pressured them from the south. Robert understood something many kings did not. A nation survives not only through war, but through smart diplomacy. With France supporting Scotland, England's resources were stretched thin. They could not launch a full invasion again. The balance of power in Europe was shifting, and Robert the Bruce was at the center of it. Edward Bruce, a brother's ambition. During this period, Robert's younger brother, Edward Bruce, dreamed of something extraordinary. He wanted to become the King of Ireland. Ireland, like Scotland, was filled with clans struggling against English control. Some leaders invited Edward Bruce to help them break free. Robert supported his brother's dream, sending troops and supplies. Edward landed in Ireland and launched campaigns against English forces. For a moment, it seemed possible that Scotland and Ireland might form a united Celtic kingdom. But fate had other plans. Edward Bruce was eventually defeated and killed in battle. His dream of becoming King of Ireland died with him. Robert was devastated, not just as a king, but as a brother. But he carried on, because the dream of Scottish freedom mattered now more than ever. The battle for recognition. By 1320, Scotland was effectively free. The people supported Robert. The English held no major territory inside Scotland, and the Scottish army was stronger than ever. But here was the problem. The Catholic Church still did not officially recognize Robert as king. And without the Church's approval, many European leaders were hesitant to treat Scotland as an independent nation. England used political pressure, letters, and influence in Rome to deny Robert legitimacy. So Scotland tried something revolutionary, something no nation had done before, something that would echo through history for centuries. The Declaration of Arbroath, 1320. On April 6, 1320,
Scottish nobles created one of the most powerful political documents ever written in medieval Europe, the Declaration of Arbroath. This was not just a letter. It was a statement of identity, unity, and unshakable determination. The declaration proclaimed that Scotland had always been free. God intended Scotland to remain free. Robert the Bruce was chosen to protect that freedom, and, most importantly, if Robert ever failed to defend Scotland's liberty, the people had the right to replace him. This was revolutionary. A medieval government declaring the authority of the people over the king? Unheard of. Bold. Years ahead of its time. Many historians believe the Declaration inspired later documents, like the U.S. Declaration of Independence, ideas of democracy, and the principle that rulers serve the people. The message was clear. Scotland will never be ruled against its will. The Pope was impressed, and England felt diplomatic pressure like never before. The world was finally listening. Peace at last. After years of war, raids, diplomacy, and negotiation, England finally agreed to talk. The English king was now overwhelmed with problems at home, rebellions, financial crises, and political enemies. He could no longer afford to fight Scotland, and he knew Robert was too strong to defeat. So in 1328, both nations signed the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton. This treaty recognized Scotland's full independence, Robert the Bruce as the lawful king, England's permanent withdrawal from Scottish lands. A war that had lasted decades was over. Robert had achieved what no one thought possible. The final years of a legend. Robert didn't have many years left after the treaty. His health began to fail, many believe due to leprosy or another debilitating illness. But even in illness, he ruled with wisdom and peace. He secured the succession for his son, the future David II. He strengthened Scotland's alliances. He ensured the nation he fought for would survive long after he was gone. In 1329, Robert the Bruce died at the age of 54. But the man who passed away was not just a king. He was a freedom fighter, a unifier, a strategist, a symbol of Scottish identity, a legend written into eternity. His heart, literally, was carried into battle years later by his loyal knight Sir James Douglas, fulfilling Robert's last wish to fight once more in the Holy Land. Even in death, Bruce marched forward.
The Blood Oath of Invermore. The winter of 1316 was harsher than any in living memory. The forests around Invermore Castle were buried under snow so deep that even the wolves stopped hunting. Yet inside the castle walls, the heat of war was rising. King Robert stood in the dim torchlight of the war chamber, staring at a tattered map of his fractured kingdom. The rebellion in the Western Highlands was spreading faster than expected. Villages were switching their loyalty every week, lured by promises of gold and land from Robert's greatest enemy, Lord Eric Dunwell, once his closest advisor. Eric's betrayal had cut deeper than any sword wound. This was a man who once held Robert's banner in every battle, who swore loyalty beside the royal fire, and now he marched with an army of mercenaries, claiming Robert had lost the right to rule. Robert clinched the edge of the map. "This ends," he whispered. Captain Rowan entered, snow melting from his armor. "Sire, the clans are divided. Some still swear loyalty, but others fear Lord Dunwell's growing power." Robert turned sharply. "Fear is a choice. Loyalty is an honor. And betrayal?" He paused. "Betrayal is a debt
paid only in blood." Rowan lowered his head. "Then the Highlands will drown in it." Robert walked to the great hearth where the fire roared. He took off his gloves, showing the scars on his hands, proof of every battle he survived. "Prepare a message," Robert said. "Summon the Highland chiefs to Invermore. They must choose a side, mine or the grave." Thus began the Blood Oath Gathering, the most dangerous political gamble of his reign. The gathering of the clans. Within 2 weeks, the great hall of Invermore filled with chieftains clad in wolf fur, bear hides, and bronze badges of their clans. Some bowed deeply, others barely nodded. Robert walked into the hall not as a king demanding respect, but as a warrior who had earned it. "My friends," he began, voice echoing through the chamber, "I did not call you here to beg for loyalty. I called you because our land is bleeding." The room fell silent. "Lord Dunwell spreads lies, that I have grown weak, that this crown has blinded me." He paused. "But you know me. You fought beside me. You bled beside me. I am the same man who saved this kingdom when invaders tried to burn it." A chieftain from Clan Morven rose. "But Dunwell offers us gold and land. Many families starve after last winter. What do you offer, King Robert?" Robert stepped down from the dais until he stood face to face with the chieftain. "I offer you something gold cannot buy, a future where your children live free, not as pawns in a traitor's game." Murmurs filled the hall. Another chieftain spoke. "If we stand with you, Dunwell will strike. He will not forgive." Robert narrowed his eyes. "I do not ask you to live for me. I ask you to stand with me so that none of us must bow to a tyrant." Silence. Then Chief Calder of the Iron Ridge clan stood, drew a dagger, cut his palm, and pressed the bloodied blade to the table. "I swear that Iron Ridge stands with King Robert." One by one, more chieftains came forward. More hands were cut. More blood hit the oak table. A blood oath, not of fear, but of unity. And with that, Robert prepared to march on Dunwell's rising rebellion. While the clans united with Robert, Lord Eric Dunwell was far from idle. Deep inside Blackwood Fortress, where the fog never lifted and the sun barely reached, Dunwell planned a darker path to power. He sat in a candlelit chamber, surrounded by mercenary generals, German swordsmen, French crossbowmen, and ruthless paid killers from the Baltic coast. One of them spoke. "The king gathers Highland clans. If they march together, they will outnumber us." Dunwell smiled coldly. "Numbers don't win wars. Fear does." He motioned to a hooded scholar who presented a scroll. "This," Dunwell said, "is the king's weakness." Inside the scroll was the secret genealogy of the royal family, a forgotten claim from a distant branch. If Dunwell proved Robert's bloodline was illegitimate, the nobles would abandon him. He hides behind honor, but honor is a fragile shield. Break it, and the man breaks with it. He planned not just to defeat Robert, but to destroy his legacy. By spring, Dunwell's army doubled in size. His agents spread rumors across the kingdom. Farmers stopped paying royal taxes. Soldiers deserted their posts. Even some minor lords began whispering, "Maybe Dunwell is the rightful heir." The kingdom trembled, but Robert did not. The March of the Wolf Batter. Spring arrived with melted snow and the rumbling of thousands of boots. Robert's army, clansmen, archers, knights, and loyal villagers marched behind the wolf banner, his symbol of unity and defiance. As they crossed the ridge overlooking the Blackwood Valley, Rowan rode beside Robert. "Sire, scouts report Dunwell has fortified the valley entrance. He wants a siege." Robert smirked. "No, he wants us to hesitate, and that we will not do." The army took position on the ridge. Robert rode to the front, raised his sword high and shouted, "Men of the Highlands, the traitor waits behind stone walls, believing we fear him. But we fear nothing, because we fight for the land that raised us, the families that need us, and the honor that defines us." A roar shook the mountains. Robert pointed his sword toward Blackwood Fortress. "Today we end treason." The battle began. Siege of Blackwood. Arrows darkened the sky. Flaming tar rolled down the ramparts. Swords clashed like thunder. Blackwood Fortress was nearly impenetrable, but Robert was relentless. For 3 days his forces attacked every gate, every wall, every hidden passage. But Dunwell had a plan. He waited for the moment Robert's forces were overextended, then sent his mercenaries to strike from the rear. Robert turned to Rowan. "Hold the line, no retreat." Rowan nodded and charged with the Wolf Guard. Inside the smoke and blood, Robert confronted Dunwell's elite soldiers. He cut down one, then another, his armor dented, his sword dripping with sweat and ash. But the real threat came from the shadows. Dunwell himself stepped into the battlefield, sword drawn, armor glistening in the firelight. "Robert," he said, voice cold, "you were never fit to wear the crown." "And you were never fit to stand beside me," Robert replied. Their duel shook the courtyard. Dunwell fought with precision and cruelty. Robert fought with raw power and honor. Steel rang, sparks flew. Their blades locked. Dunwell pushed close and whispered, "When you die, your kingdom dies with you." Robert roared and broke free. The battle raged for hours, but at the moment Dunwell tried to strike a killing blow, an arrow from Rowan cut across the courtyard, wounding the traitor's leg. Dunwell fell. Robert stood over him. "Your war ends." But Dunwell laughed through the blood. "Fool, my war was never for the crown. It was for the truth." He tossed a blood-stained scroll at Robert's feet. "Read it and watch your kingdom crumble." Then he died. The Scroll of Shadows. When the battle ended, Robert returned to his tent, exhausted and wounded. Rowan brought the scroll. "Sire, he carried this to his death. It seems important." Robert unrolled it. His breath stopped. The scroll claimed that Robert's grandfather was not the true heir of the royal line, but the son of a common soldier. If true, Robert's bloodline was illegitimate, his claim to the throne invalid. Rowan saw Robert's hands tremble. "Sire, it could be forged." "Or it could be the truth," he whispered. "If it spreads, the nobles will rise again," Rowan said. Robert closed the scroll slowly. "Then I must uncover the truth myself." And thus began the darkest chapter of his reign, the quest for the lost lineage. Night settled over the war camp like a heavy cloak. Torches flickered in the wind, and soldiers whispered about the victory at Blackwood. Yet their king felt no triumph. Inside his tent, Robert sat alone, staring at the cursed scroll. Illegitimate, false heir, unfit to rule. Each word felt like a blade cutting his soul. Rowan entered silently. "Still awake, sire? The men believe Dunwell's rebellion is ended." Robert did not look up. "Ended? Rowan, if this scroll is true, then it has just begun." Rowan stepped closer. "Robert, you have ruled with honor. You earned that crown through battle, loyalty, and sacrifice. Bloodline does not make a king, actions do." Robert clenched his jaw. "The nobles will not see it that way. If this spreads, the throne will shatter." He rolled up the scroll. "I must find the truth. If my lineage is false, I must know it before anyone else does." Rowan nodded. "Where will we look?" Robert took a deep breath. In the one place the truth was buried centuries ago, the monastery of St. Wulfric. My grandfather was raised there. If secrets exist, they live in those walls. The road to St. Wulfric. The next morning, Robert rode out with a small escort, Rowan, 2 elite wolf guards, and a scholar named Master Aldrich, who specialized in old royal records. They traveled through valleys still scarred by war, burned farms, abandoned hamlets, bridges collapsed from battle. Aldrich studied the scroll during the journey. "The handwriting is extremely old," he muttered. "If forged, it is masterful. But there are details. I must compare them with the monastery archives." Robert's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "What do you know of my grandfather?" Aldrich cleared his throat. "He was brought to the monastery as an infant. The monks claimed he was the son of a fallen noble, but the records around that era are incomplete." "Destroyed?" Robert asked. "Or hidden?" They reached the slopes of the Grey Mist Mountains, where St. Wulfric's monastery sat carved into the cliffside like a fortress of silence. Clouds curled around its stone walls, and bells echoed faintly in the icy wind. Rowan looked uneasy. "Monasteries always make my skin crawl. Too quiet." Robert dismounted. "Truth rarely shouts, Rowan. It whispers." They climbed the stone steps to the great wooden doors. Robert knocked. Moments later, an elderly monk opened the door. His eyes widened when he saw Robert. "Your Majesty," his voice trembled, "we have been expecting you." Rowan stiffened. "Expecting us? How?" The monk stepped aside. "There are things you must see." Robert exchanged a troubled glance with Rowan, then entered. The hidden chamber. The interior of the monastery was cold, lit only by narrow beams of morning sun. Monks watched silently as Robert passed. They were led to the lower archives, stone halls filled with dust, ancient tomes, and wooden chests sealed with iron. The old monk, Brother Lorien, unlocked a heavy gate. "Your grandfather, Sir Alden, was brought here by royal guards. They commanded us to keep his origins secret." "Why?" Robert asked. Lorien looked down. "Because his mother died protecting him, and his father was not the man history claims." Robert's heartbeat quickened. "Who was his father?" Lorien hesitated, then walked deeper into the archive. He stopped before a stone wall carved with faded symbols. With a hidden mechanism, he pressed 3 stones.
The wall slid open. Behind it lay a small chamber filled with scrolls wrapped in red silk. Rowan whispered, "A vault, hidden for decades." Lorien turned to Robert. "Everything inside belongs to your bloodline and your truth." Robert entered the chamber. Dust thickened the air. Shelves creaked under the weight of forgotten documents. Master Aldrich opened the first scroll. His voice cracked. "Sire, this is a birth record. Your grandfather was born not to a noble, but to a queen in exile." Robert's eyes widened. "A queen?" "Yes," Aldrich said. "Queen Ilara of the Eastern Isles.
She fled her homeland during a war and sought refuge in our kingdom. She had a secret child. Rowan frowned. But who was the father? Aldrich opened another scroll. His face turned pale. His father was... He paused. Robert stepped forward. Say it. Aldrich swallowed hard. His father was the commander of the royal guard, not the king. He took a shaky breath. Sire, the scroll Dunwell carried was true. You are not of the old royal bloodline. Silence. A chilling, suffocating silence. Robert stepped back, gripping the edge of a stone table. For the first time, he felt the weight of history crush him. The king without a crown. Rowan placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. Sire, this changes nothing. You built this kingdom. You united the clans. A bloodline does not diminish your strength. But Robert shook his head. The throne was built on lies. My family held power under false lineage. The nobles will not forgive it, and they will not follow a king without legal birthright. Aldrich spoke softly. There is another document. He unrolled a final scroll. This one was written by King Alistair himself, the last true heir before your grandfather's time. Robert's breath stopped. What does it say? Aldrich read slowly. Should my line ever fail, the throne shall pass to the one who proves worthy through action, loyalty, and the defense of this land. For no royal birth determines a king, only the strength of his character. Robert's eyes widened. A succession decree? Rowan whispered. Aldrich nodded. It means, sire, King Alistair appointed your grandfather's line as rightful rulers not by blood, but by merit. By law, you are the legitimate king. The chamber fell silent again, but this time with relief. Robert closed his eyes. The weight lifted. The truth was painful, but it gave him something greater than heritage. It gave him purpose. He turned to Rowan. We return to the capital. The nobles must hear the truth before lies spread. Rowan grinned. And if they don't like it? Robert smiled coldly. Then we'll remind them why the wolf banner commands fear. The return to the capital. Their journey back was swift, fueled by urgency. But when they neared the capital, they saw smoke rising from the horizon. Rowan narrowed his eyes. That's no chimney smoke. Robert spurred his horse forward. Villagers rushed past them. Run! The capital is under attack! Robert felt the world tilt. By whom? He demanded. A terrified man gasped. The Iron Duke! He marches with foreign soldiers! Rowan cursed. That vulture waited for Dunwell's fall to make his move. Robert drew his sword. No more rebels, no more traitors. This ends now. And with that, King Robert charged toward a burning capital to save his crown, his people, and his legacy.
Smoke on the horizon. Robert spurred his horse as Rowan, Aldrich, and the Wolf Guard rode beside him. Smoke darkened the morning sky. Flames licked the edges of the capital's walls, and the shouts of panic-filled citizens echoed across the streets. Villagers fled, carrying bundles of clothes and children. But the soldiers of the Iron Duke pressed the attack, cutting down anyone in their way. Robert gritted his teeth. This city is my heart. Every stone, every wall belongs to Scotland, and no foreign hand will claim it. Rowan tightened his grip on his lance. Then we remind them what the wolf banner means. The Iron Duke revealed. The Iron Duke, whose real name was Lord Magnus von Herten,
had been a mercenary commander in Europe before arriving in Scotland. He was tall, armored in black steel, with a crimson scarf around his neck and a reputation for cruelty unmatched by any knight in Europe. When Magnus saw Robert approach with a small but determined force, he smirked. "A king alone? Against my army?" he said loudly, his voice carrying over the chaos. "You should have stayed in your monastery, Bruce. Now watch your people burn." Robert raised his sword. "I am never alone when I ride for Scotland." The streets of battle. Robert and Rowan charged into the streets of battle, meeting Magnus's soldiers in brutal close combat. Archers fired from the rooftops, swinging axes and swords clashed, and the citizens fled into alleys, praying for survival. Robert moved like a whirlwind, cutting through the enemy ranks. Every swing, every step commanded respect. Soldiers fell before him, and his men gained confidence from his courage. Rowan shouted, "Protect the civilians! Shield them!" The Wolf Guard formed a protective wall, pushing the enemy back, while Robert advanced toward Magnus. The duel of fates. Finally, Robert and Magnus faced each other in the ruins of the city square. Smoke from burning buildings created an eerie twilight. Magnus swung a massive battle axe. Robert parried with his sword. Sparks flew with every strike. "You think a king's courage can defeat my blade?" Magnus roared. "A king's courage can move mountains. Your mercenaries are just stones in the path." They fought relentlessly. Soldiers watched from the shadows, fearing to intervene. Every strike, block, and movement was a test of skill, will, and destiny. After a long struggle, Robert feinted left, then swung right with lethal precision. His sword sliced Magnus's shoulder, forcing him to stumble. Magnus tried to retreat, but Robert followed immediately, driving him to the edge of the city moat. With a final thrust, Robert disarmed Magnus and held his blade to his duke's throat. "Your war ends here," Robert said. Magnus, defeated but alive, spit blood. "You may win today, but Scotland will always have enemies." Robert replied, "Then I will be here to meet them every time." Securing the capital. With the Iron Duke captured, Robert ordered the city's defenses reinforced. Citizens cheered, raising the wolf banner over the burned gates. The streets, though scarred by battle, were safe once again. Robert walked among the people, shaking hands, offering words of comfort, and reminding them of their resilience. He was more than a king, he was a symbol of hope. Rowan approached. "Your Majesty, the nobles will hear of this victory. Dunwell is gone, Magnus is captured, the crown is secure." Robert looked to the horizon. Secure, yes, but a king must never rest while shadows linger. Diplomacy and legacy. After the siege, Robert summoned the noble council. He presented the scrolls from St. Wulfric and revealed the truth of his lineage. Many nobles gasped at first, then murmured. Doubts arose. But Robert reminded them of his deeds, victories in battle, the unification of the clans, protection of the people, and the liberation of Scotland. "Blood does not make a king," Robert said. "Action, loyalty, courage, and love for our people do." By the end of the council, all swore loyalty to Robert once again. His legitimacy was not questioned, for he had proven it through deeds, not inheritance. Building a kingdom. Robert spent the following years consolidating power, rebuilding cities destroyed in rebellions, and reinforcing Scotland's defenses. Roads were repaired to connect clans. Castles and fortresses were strengthened. Trade with France and other allies flourished. Education and monastic learning were encouraged. The wolf banner became a symbol of unity, bravery, and freedom. Robert also ensured the succession of his son, David II, preparing the young prince to rule with wisdom and courage. Even in his final years, Robert remained vigilant, teaching, advising, and inspiring. He knew that a kingdom's strength is measured not only in battles won, but in the enduring spirit of its people. The king who defied fate. Robert's life was now legend. From exile and betrayal to victory and legacy, he had faced English invasions, treacherous nobles, mercenary armies, questions of legitimacy, the trials of leadership. Yet he triumphed because of his courage, vision, and unwavering determination. Europe spoke of Robert the Bruce not only as a warrior king, but as a symbol that freedom, honor, and unity could withstand even the darkest times. Even centuries later, tales of his exploits inspired generations. Students of history marveled at his strategy. Leaders studied his diplomacy and unity tactics. Artists immortalized his battles, his banners, and his courage. And in Scotland, he was not just a king. He was the father of a nation. Final reflections. As the sun set over the Scottish Highlands, Robert walked the ramparts of his castle. The wind carried the scent of heather and the echo of past battles. Rowan joined him. "You look at the horizon as if the battles never end." Robert smiled faintly. "The battles never truly end, but the victories, they are worth it. Every life saved, every village rebuilt, every oath kept, that is the true crown." Rowan nodded. "And the people love you for it." Robert gazed at the wolf banner fluttering in the wind. "Yes, and that is why a king is more than bloodline or title. A king lives in the hearts of his people. And as long as Scotland remembers, I will live forever." The sun dipped below the mountains, and the story of King Robert the Resolute passed into history, a legend of courage, unity, and unyielding strength.
After decades of war, rebellion, and political intrigue, Robert finally found a moment of peace. The Highlands were quiet, the castles were secure, the people were prosperous. He spent mornings walking through village markets, talking to farmers, craftsmen, and children. He listened to their stories and troubles, offering guidance and wisdom. In these simple moments, Robert understood that his battles were not just for glory, they were for the lives of everyday Scots. Strengthening the kingdom. Robert focused on long-term stability. He established a council of loyal nobles to advise governance, ensuring no one man could seize power unjustly. Trade agreements with France and the Netherlands strengthened Scotland's economy. Laws were codified to protect farmers, merchants, and the poor. Monasteries became centers of learning, preserving history and training new scholars. Even military strategy remained important. Robert modernized fortifications and trained new generations of warriors under the Wolf Banner, creating a permanent force loyal to the kingdom rather than individual lords. Mentorship of David II. Robert's son, David II, was still young when his father began preparing him to inherit the crown. Robert's lessons were not just about warfare. A king must listen to his people, even when it is painful, Robert said. A crown is heavy, but loyalty and trust are heavier. A king's strength is measured not by blood, but by action. David trained tirelessly, learning archery, swordsmanship, diplomacy, and law. Robert made sure his son understood that a true king leads by example, not fear. Facing mortality. As the years passed, Robert's health began to fail.
Historians debate whether it was leprosy or a lingering battle injury that weakened him. His hair grayed, his hands shook, but his mind remained sharp. He continued to hold counsel, oversee defenses, and mentor his son. One evening, as he watched the sunset over the highlands, Rowan approached. "You've given Scotland everything, sire. Your name will live forever." Robert nodded slowly. "I hope so, Rowan. But a king lives not only in stone and sword, but in the hearts of his people. That is my true legacy." The final battle of a lifetime. Although Robert faced no major wars in his final years, threats still lingered. Minor rebellions, English border skirmishes, and foreign mercenary spies. Robert remained a vigilant leader, demonstrating that even in old age, courage and strategy are timeless. His leadership ensured that Scotland stayed free, independent, and united, a feat many thought impossible decades earlier.
Robert the Bruce passed away in 1329 at the age of 54. His death was mourned across Scotland. Bells tolled in every village. Tributes were held in every castle. Soldiers, nobles, and peasants alike lined the streets for the funeral procession. He was buried in Dunfermline Abbey, surrounded by banners of the Wolf and loyal family. His heart, according to legend, was taken by Sir James Douglas on a crusade to the Holy Land, fulfilling the king's final wish to fight for God and honor even after death. Robert's passing marked the end of a personal era, but the beginning of his eternal legacy. The Wolf Banner lives on. The Wolf Banner, Robert's symbol of courage, unity, and freedom, continued to inspire generations of Scots. It became a rallying point during later wars of independence. It appeared in art, literature, and poetry, celebrating bravery and national pride. Historians and educators studied Robert's campaigns as examples of strategy, leadership, and diplomacy. The lessons he taught, that honor, courage, and unity matter more than birthright, influenced not just Scotland, but nations across Europe. Europe and beyond. Robert's victories resonated across medieval Europe. Kings and rulers studied his unconventional strategies and the use of terrain to defeat superior forces. Scholars admired his combination of diplomacy and military acumen. Clergy recognized his wisdom in balancing faith, politics, and governance. Some even argue that his story influenced early ideas of nationhood and independence centuries later, inspiring movements where leaders had to win loyalty through action rather than inheritance. For generations. Centuries later, the story of Robert the Bruce was immortalized in ballads sung by traveling minstrels, paintings of epic battles, historical books chronicling Scottish freedom, modern documentaries and media exploring medieval history. Robert became a symbol for anyone fighting for justice, freedom, and the courage to challenge overwhelming odds. Reflections of a King. In the annals of history, Robert is remembered not only as a warrior, but as a visionary king. A man who unified a divided land. A king who fought for the people, not just for crown. A strategist whose intellect was as sharp as his sword. A symbol of perseverance, courage, and integrity. His story reminds us that true leadership is earned through action, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to justice. Legacy in modern Scotland. Today, statues, memorials, and historical sites honor Robert the Bruce. Dunfermline Abbey holds his remains. The site of Bannockburn is visited by thousands, commemorating the pivotal battle. Students learn about his courage and vision in schools across Scotland. Even modern political and military leaders cite his strategies and leadership as examples of brilliance in history. The Eternal King. Robert the Bruce may have died in 1329, but his influence is timeless. His story is more than battles and politics. It is a tale of loyalty, courage, strategy, vision, legacy. He showed that a single individual, armed with honor and determination, could change the course of history. And that, my friends, is why Robert the Bruce will always be remembered.
Hi guys. As we close this incredible journey, remember this. One person, armed with courage and vision, can change the course of history. Leadership is earned through action, integrity, and sacrifice. Legacy is not about titles or birthright. It is about the lives you touch and the inspiration you leave. King Robert the Resolute's life is more than history. It is a guide, a story, and a lesson that transcends time. So whenever you see a wolf banner flutter, remember the king who defied fate, united a nation, and carved his name into history forever.